Listen to that sound. That is not a soundtrack. That is not music. That is not fiction. That is the actual radio emission of Saturn, converted into audio by NASA. It is the sound of a planet screaming into the void, an electromagnetic wail crossing 1.2 billion kilometers of empty space just to reach your ears. And what did we do when we heard it? We called it beautiful. For thousands of years, every civilization that looked up saw Saturn and felt something. The Babylonians called it Ninurta, the god of war. The Greeks called it Kronos, the Titan who devoured his own children to prevent them from overthrowing him. He ate them alive, one by one. The Romans named it Saturn, the god of time, of endings, of the harvest that always comes due. The Hindus called it Shani, the bringer of suffering, the judge who punishes the wicked and the righteous alike. Every ancient culture looked at that golden dot and associated it with destruction, with death, with time running out, and we ignored them. We built better telescopes, we sent probes, we took photographs, and the more we saw, the more we fell in love. The rings, the golden clouds, the perfect symmetry. We put Saturn on posters, on textbook covers, on the walls of children's bedrooms. We printed it on t-shirts. We made it a screensaver. We turned a god of death into a desktop background. We made a monster into a decoration. But here is the truth they do not print on posters. Saturn is not peaceful. It is not gentle. It is not safe. It is a violent colossus, a ball of hydrogen and helium spinning so fast it has deformed itself into the shape of a pumpkin. A world where winds scream at 1,800 kilometers per hour, where lightning strikes with the power of 1 billion volts, where the pressure is so extreme that it crushes hydrogen into liquid metal. And the rings, those beautiful, iconic rings, are not jewelry. They are evidence of a murder. This is the real Saturn. And once you see it, you will never look at the night sky the same way again. Let us start with what Saturn actually is, because even that is stranger than you think. Saturn is the second largest planet in our solar system. You could fit 764 Earths inside it. If you lined up every continent on Earth, every mountain, every ocean, every city ever built by human hands, and dropped them into Saturn, they would vanish like a grain of sand in a swimming pool. Every war we have ever fought, every empire we have ever built, every monument, every skyscraper, every road, all of it, gone, invisible, meaningless against the scale of this thing. But here is the first paradox. Despite being massive enough to hold 764 Earths, Saturn is light, absurdly light. Its density is 0.687 grams per cubic centimeter. Water is 1. Saturn is less dense than water. If you could find a bathtub large enough, and I mean a bathtub 120,000 kilometers wide, Saturn would float. The second largest planet in the solar system would bob on the surface like a rubber duck. That sounds funny. It is not, because that low density is a warning. It means Saturn is not solid. There is no ground, no surface, no place to stand, no place to land, no place to hide. Saturn is a planet made almost entirely of gas and liquid, a sphere of hydrogen and helium with no boundary between sky and sea. If you fell into Saturn, you would not land. You would just keep sinking through clouds of ammonia crystals that look like golden cathedrals, through layers of hydrogen gas that get thicker and hotter with every kilometer. The temperature rises, the pressure builds, the light fades. fades. The golden glow above you dims to amber, then to brown, then to black. You are falling through an atmosphere that has no floor. The gas becomes so compressed it stops behaving like gas and starts behaving like liquid. There is no splash, no surface tension, no moment of transition. 1 second you are falling through thick gas, the next you are swimming through liquid hydrogen, but you are still sinking, deeper, hotter, darker. The pressure is now thousands of times what you would feel at the bottom of Earth's deepest ocean. Your submarine, if you had one, would have been crushed into a ball of metal thousands of kilometers ago. But let us pretend you survive. Let us pretend you keep going. At around 30,000 kilometers below the cloud tops, something extraordinary happens. The pressure becomes so extreme, millions of times the atmospheric pressure on Earth, that hydrogen undergoes a phase transition. The atoms are crushed so tightly together that electrons break free and flow between them. The hydrogen becomes metallic, liquid metallic hydrogen, a substance so exotic it barely exists anywhere else in the known universe. It conducts electricity, it generates magnetic fields, it glows with a dull, oppressive heat. It is the engine that powers Saturn's electromagnetic scream, the sound you heard at the beginning. You are now 30,000 kilometers deep inside a planet, surrounded by liquid metal in total darkness at temperatures that would vaporize steel. And you are not even halfway to the center. And at the very center, we think there is a core, a ball of rock and ice, perhaps 15 to 20 times the mass of Earth, crushed under pressures that would obliterate anything we have ever built. The temperature at Saturn's core is estimated at 11,700 degrees Celsius, hotter than the surface of the Sun. Recent data from Cassini suggests this core may not be a solid ball at all. It may be a diffuse, fuzzy region where rock and ice are dissolved into the metallic hydrogen like sugar in hot water, a core that is melting into its own planet. Saturn radiates 2.5 times more energy than it receives from the Sun. Let that sink in. It is generating its own heat, its own power. It is not just reflecting sunlight like a jewel. It is burning from within, like something alive, like something with an engine, like something with a purpose, and it spins. God, does it spin. Saturn completes a full rotation in just 10 hours and 34 minutes. A day on Saturn is less than half a day on Earth. For a planet this size, that is violent. The equator is moving at roughly 35,000 kilometers per hour. That rotational speed is so extreme that it physically distorts the planet. Saturn's equatorial diameter is nearly 10% wider than its polar diameter. It is not a sphere. It is an oblate spheroid, squashed, bulging, deformed by its own fury. You can see it in photographs. Saturn looks wrong. It looks stretched. It looks like a planet that is trying to tear itself apart. And that spin does something else. It whips the atmosphere into bands of wind that make Earth's worst hurricanes look like a gentle breeze. The jet streams on Saturn reach speeds of 1,800 kilometers per hour. That is 5 times the speed of sound on Earth. If you could somehow stand in Saturn's atmosphere, which you cannot, because there's nothing to stand on, the wind would not just knock you over. It would strip the flesh from your bones before you could blink. It would atomize you. You would become a mist of organic molecules scattered across 1,000 kilometers of golden cloud. This is not a planet. This is a machine, a machine made of gas and fury, spinning in the dark, screaming into the void, generating its own heat, crushing its own core, and we call it beautiful. We call it the jewel of the solar system. We are fools. Now let us talk about the rings, because the rings are where beauty becomes a crime scene. From Earth, Saturn's rings look like solid bands of pure gold, smooth, perfect, eternal. They are the most recognizable feature of any planet in our solar system. They are the reason Saturn is on every poster, every textbook, every child's drawing of space. Ask anyone to draw a planet, and they will draw Saturn, not because it is the biggest, not because it is the closest, but because of the rings. The rings are why we love Saturn, and the rings are Saturn's greatest lie. If you were to fly inside them, you would find yourself in a grinder. The rings are not solid. They are a chaotic blizzard of billions upon billions of individual pieces. Chunks of ice and rock ranging from the size of a grain of sand to the size of a house, some as large as a mountain. Each one is orbiting Saturn at thousands of kilometers per hour. And they are not orbiting peacefully. They are colliding, constantly, smashing into each other, shattering, reforming, grinding each other down into dust, and then clumping together again, only to be shattered once more. Imagine a highway with no lanes, no rules, no brakes, and every vehicle is made of razor-sharp ice, moving at rifle bullet speed. Now stretch that highway for 300,000 kilometers. That is what the rings are. A 300,000 kilometer-wide storm of frozen shrapnel. A blizzard that never ends. A grinder that has been running for 100 million years. And here is what makes it even more disturbing. Despite stretching nearly the width of the distance from Earth to the Moon, the rings are almost impossibly thin. In most places, they are only about 10 meters thick. Some sections are as thin as 1 meter. Think about that. 300,000 kilometers wide, 10 meters thick. A sheet of ice and violence so flat it is essentially two-dimensional. A blade orbiting a gas giant, a razor made of frozen death. If you approached the rings from the side, edge on, they would nearly disappear. Galileo discovered this in 1612, when the rings seemed to vanish from his telescope. He was terrified. He wrote to a colleague that Saturn had swallowed its children, just like the myth said, just like Kronos. He was closer to the truth than he knew. Because the rings are not ancient. They are not as old as Saturn. For decades, scientists assumed the rings formed with the planet 4.5 billion years ago, when the solar system was born. It seemed obvious. Saturn has rings. Saturn has always had rings. The rings are part of Saturn, but data from the Cassini mission shattered that assumption. The rings are clean, too clean. If they were billions of years old, they would be darkened by cosmic dust, by micrometeorite impacts, by the slow accumulation of interplanetary debris over eons. Space is not empty. It is full of dust. Over billions of years, that dust would coat the rings like soot on snow. But the rings are bright, brilliant white. Almost pristine, like fresh snow on a winter morning. The current estimate is that Saturn's rings are between 100 million and 400 million years old. In cosmic terms, that is yesterday. When the rings formed, dinosaurs were already walking the Earth. T-Rex might have looked up at the night sky and seen a Saturn without rings. The rings are younger than most of the fossils in our museums. So what happened? Where did they come from? A murder. The prevailing theory is a tragedy written in ice. Long ago, perhaps 200 million years ago, a moon orbited Saturn. A large moon, perhaps as large as Titan. It had a rocky core and an icy crust. It was a world. It may have had an ocean beneath its surface. It may have had the chemistry for life. It existed. It was real. And it made a fatal mistake. It wandered too close. Every massive body in space has an invisible boundary around it called the Roche limit, named after the French astronomer Édouard Roche, who calculated it in 1848. Cross that line, and the tidal forces, the difference in gravitational pull between the near side and the far side of your body, becomes stronger than the forces holding you together. Your own structural integrity fails. You do not just fall. You are pulled apart, stretched, torn, shredded. This moon crossed Saturn's Roche limit, and Saturn's gravity grabbed it. Not gently, not slowly. It seized the moon and ripped the icy crust from the rocky core, layer by layer, piece by piece. It shredded a world, a place that might have had oceans beneath its surface, that might have had the ingredients for life, into trillions of frozen fragments. The rocky core, heavier and denser, sank into Saturn and was swallowed, consumed, digested, gone forever. The ice, lighter and more fragile, spread out into a disk, a ring, a halo. Saturn ate the heart of a moon and wore its skin as a crown. The beautiful rings we admire today are not jewelry. They are the scattered remains of a dead world. Every chunk of ice in those rings was once part of something whole, something that existed, something that Saturn destroyed. We are staring at a planetary graveyard and calling it pretty, but it gets worse. Because Saturn is not done killing. The rings are not stable. They are actively being destroyed right now as you listen to this. Saturn's gravity and its magnetic field are pulling ring material down into the planet's atmosphere in a phenomenon called ring rain. Charged water molecules from the rings spiral along magnetic field lines and fall into Saturn's upper atmosphere. Every second, roughly 432 kilograms of ring material falls into Saturn. Every second. That is enough to fill an Olympic swimming pool every 30 minutes. The rings are bleeding into the planet that created them. The victim is being slowly consumed by its killer. At this rate, scientists estimate the rings will be completely gone in 100 to 300 million years. That sounds like a long time. It is not. Saturn is 4.5 billion years old. The rings have existed for maybe 200 million years and will last maybe 200 million more. In the lifespan of Saturn, the rings are a flash, a momentary decoration, a brief glittering wound that is already healing. We are alive during the only window in Saturn's entire existence when it has rings. A few 100 million years out of billions. We are witnessing something temporary, something dying, something that most of Saturn's history never had and most of its future never will. The odds of being alive at the exact right time to see Saturn's rings are astronomically small. And yet, here we are, looking at a crime scene and calling it the most beautiful thing in the solar system. And there is one more thing about the rings that keeps scientists awake at night: the gaps. The rings are not one continuous sheet. They are divided into distinct bands, The A ring, the B ring, the C ring, the D ring, and others, separated by dark gaps. The most famous is the Cassini division, a 4,800-kilometer-wide gap that looks empty from Earth. But it is not empty. It is maintained by gravitational resonance with Saturn's moons, specifically a moon called Mimas. Mimas orbits Saturn at a specific distance, and its gravity tugs on ring particles in the Cassini division at regular intervals, like pushing a child on a swing at just the right moment. Over time, these tiny tugs clear the gap, sweeping particles out and keeping the division open. The rings are being sculpted by invisible hands, shaped by moons, carved by gravity. The entire ring system is a dynamic living battlefield where moons and ice wage a silent war measured in millennia. And within the rings themselves, there are structures that defy explanation. Spokes, dark, radial features that appear and disappear across the B-ring like shadows cast by nothing. They rotate with Saturn's magnetic field, not with the orbital speed of the ring particles. They should not exist according to our models. They seem to be clouds of tiny charged particles levitating above the ring plane, held aloft by electromagnetic forces. We have been studying them since Voyager first spotted them in 1980. We still do not fully understand them. The rings are not simple. They are not decoration. They are a graveyard, a battlefield, a mystery, and a countdown clock, all at once. Now, look at the North Pole. What you are about to see should not be possible. Nature does not make straight lines. This is one of the first things you learn in any science class. Fluid dynamics, the physics of moving gases and liquids, creates curves, circles, spirals, vortices. Every hurricane on Earth is round. Every storm on Jupiter is round. The Great Red Spot, a storm that has been raging for centuries, is an oval. Every cyclone, every whirlpool, every eddy, and every ocean on every world we've ever studied is round, except this one. At Saturn's North Pole, there is a hexagon, a perfect six-sided geometric shape made entirely of wind. It is not carved into the surface. There is no surface. It is not a physical structure. It is a standing wave pattern in the jet stream, a current of air moving at over 300 kilometers per hour that has somehow locked itself into a shape with 6 equal sides and 6 equal angles. It is 30,000 kilometers across. You could fit 4 Earths inside it, side by side, with room to spare. It extends hundreds of kilometers deep into the atmosphere, and it has been there for at least 40 years, since Voyager first photographed it in 1981. Probably much longer, possibly centuries, possibly as long as Saturn has existed. How? Why? Why 6 sides? Why not 5? Why not 7? Why not a circle, like every other storm in the known universe? The leading theory involves the interaction between Saturn's polar jet stream and the slower-moving atmosphere around it. When a fast-moving current flows past a slower medium, it can create standing waves, like the ripples that form downstream of a rock in a river. On Saturn, the specific speed differential and the planet's rotation rate conspire to create a wave with exactly 6 peaks, a hexagon. Laboratory experiments on Earth have replicated this effect. Spinning a fluid at the right speed in a circular tank can produce polygonal shapes. But those experiments produce shapes that wobble, drift, and collapse within minutes. Saturn's hexagon does not wobble. It does not drift. It does not collapse. And here is what disturbs scientists. The hexagon is stable. incredibly, impossibly stable. On Earth, weather patterns shift and dissolve in days. Hurricanes last weeks at most. The most persistent storm system on Earth, the polar vortex, is a shapeless, shifting blob that changes form with every season. But Saturn's hexagon has maintained its shape for decades, without breaking apart, without drifting, without losing a single side. It is locked in place, spinning with the planet, as if it were carved there by something with a ruler and a compass. And it changes color. When Cassini first arrived at Saturn in 2004, the hexagon was a deep blue, the color of Saturn's atmosphere in shadow. By 2017, it had turned golden. The entire hexagon had changed color over the course of a Saturnian season, as sunlight reached the North Pole for the first time in 15 years. A geometric shape the size of a continent, changing its appearance with the seasons, like something alive, like something aware. And at the very center of the hexagon lies something even more terrifying. A vortex, a massive spinning eye, 2,000 kilometers across, with cloud walls rising 75 kilometers high. It looks like a hurricane. It behaves like a hurricane. But it is 4 times the size of any hurricane ever recorded on Earth, and it sits perfectly centered inside the hexagon, like a pupil inside an iris. The Cassini spacecraft flew directly over this vortex and captured images that are genuinely unsettling. The eye is deep, deeper than anything we expected. You can see down into layers of Saturn's atmosphere that are normally hidden. Amber and gold clouds swirling in concentric circles, pulling inward, always inward, like water draining into a hole that has no bottom. It looks like a rose made of hurricanes. It looks like an eye staring back at you. It looks like something that should not exist on a planet made of gas. And the South Pole? It has its own vortex, but no hexagon. Just a massive, chaotic storm, as if the southern hemisphere got the same energy, but none of the order.
The asymmetry is unexplained. Why does one pole create perfect geometry while the other creates chaos? We do not know. We have theories. We have models. We have simulations. None of them fully explain it. Saturn's hexagon is one of the most alien things we have ever discovered in our solar system. Not because it is dangerous, not because it is violent, but because it is orderly. Because in a universe that trends toward entropy, toward disorder, toward randomness, Saturn's North Pole has maintained a perfect geometric shape for longer than most nations on Earth have existed. Order emerging from chaos, pattern emerging from violence, geometry emerging from a storm. And that, somehow, is more frightening than any storm. Saturn, most of the time, looks calm. Golden bands of cloud, subtle variations in color, gentle gradients of amber and cream. A planet that appears to be sleeping. It is not sleeping. It is waiting. Every 20 to 30 Earth years, roughly once per Saturnian year, something happens. Something erupts from deep within the planet's interior, with a violence that transforms the entire world. We call it the Great White Spot. It begins as a small, bright patch in Saturn's northern hemisphere. A bubble of warm gas rising from the deep interior, punching through the upper cloud layers like a fist through paper. At first it is barely visible, a white smudge against the golden clouds. Easy to miss. Easy to ignore. Do not ignore it. Within days it grows. Within weeks, it has become a storm system, thousands of kilometers across. Within months, It has wrapped itself around the entire circumference of the planet. A single storm, encircling a world like a belt of white fire. The Great White Spot of 2010, the most recent one, captured in extraordinary detail by Cassini, grew to encircle Saturn completely. A single storm system that stretched 300,000 kilometers, longer than the distance from the Earth to the Moon. It generated lightning bolts 10,000 times more powerful than anything ever recorded on Earth. Not 10 times, not 100 times, 10,000 times. Each flash illuminated an area the size of a continent. Each bolt released more energy than a nuclear weapon. The thunder, if you could hear it through the vacuum of space, would have been loud enough to rupture every eardrum on Earth simultaneously. And these bolts were not occasional. They were continuous. Thousands of strikes per minute, for months. The storm was a strobe light the size of a planet. The storm churned up ammonia ice from deep within Saturn's interior. White crystals that rose through the golden clouds and turned vast swaths of the planet pale. Saturn's signature golden color was bleached. The Cantinas planet looked sick, infected, diseased, as if something buried deep inside had finally broken through the skin, as if the planet was vomiting its own interior into the upper atmosphere. And here is what makes the Great White Spot truly terrifying. We do not fully understand what triggers it. The leading theory is convective instability. Saturn's interior is hot. Remember, the core is nearly 12,000 degrees Celsius. That heat slowly rises through the layers of the atmosphere. But Saturn's upper atmosphere is cold, around minus 180 degrees Celsius. This creates a temperature gradient, a tension between the hot interior and the cold exterior. For decades, that tension builds. The heat accumulates. The pressure grows. The atmosphere becomes increasingly unstable, like a pot of water on a stove that has not yet begun to boil. The surface looks calm. The surface always looks calm. But beneath it, the energy is building, compressing, waiting. And then, all at once, it boils. The Great White Spot is Saturn having a convulsive episode, a planet-wide seizure. Decades of accumulated thermal energy released in a single, catastrophic eruption that reshapes the entire atmosphere. It is not a storm in the way we understand storms. It is a pressure release, a planetary scream. The planet cannot hold it in any longer, and so it explodes from the inside out. After the storm passes, and it takes months, sometimes over a year, Saturn slowly returns to its golden calm. The ammonia ice settles, the clouds reform, the bands smooth out, the scars fade, and the clock resets. The heat begins to build again. The next Great White Spot is expected sometime around 2040. It will happen. It always happens. It has been happening for as long as Saturn has existed. And when it does, if we have spacecraft in orbit, we will witness a gas giant convulsing with a violence that makes every natural disaster in human history look like a candle flame in a hurricane. Saturn is patient. But Saturn always erupts. Saturn is the king of a court of more than 140 moons, a swarm of frozen worlds trapped in its gravitational embrace, each one a prisoner, each one a story. Some are tiny, barely a kilometer across, tumbling through the darkness like lost pebbles. Some are strange. Hyperion looks like a sponge. Iapetus has a ridge running around its equator, like the seam on a tennis ball. Pan is shaped like a ravioli. But one of them is different. One of them is an imposter. Titan. Titan is the second largest moon in the solar system, bigger than the planet Mercury. But size is not what makes Titan special. What makes Titan special is that it is wearing a disguise. Titan is the only moon in the solar system with a thick atmosphere, not a thin wisp of gas like Europa or Triton. A real atmosphere, a dense, opaque, nitrogen-rich atmosphere that is actually thicker than Earth's. The air pressure on Titan's surface is 1.5 times the air pressure at sea level on Earth. If you stood on Titan, you would feel more atmospheric weight pressing down on you than you do right now, sitting wherever you are on Earth. That atmosphere is orange, a thick, impenetrable haze of organic molecules. Tholin, a complex mixture of hydrocarbons and nitriles created by ultraviolet radiation, breaking apart methane and nitrogen in the upper atmosphere. From space, Titan looks like a smooth, orange marble. You cannot see the surface. The atmosphere hides everythhuyng, like a mask. And when the Cassini spacecraft arrived at Saturn in 2004 and released the Huygens probe, a small lander built by the European Space Agency, toward Titan's surface, what it found beneath that mask was shocking. Huygens descended through Titan's orange haze for 2 hours and 27 minutes, the longest extraterrestrial descent in history. And as it broke through the lowest cloud layer, its cameras activated, and it saw something that made mission controllers gasp. Rivers, lakes, coastlines, rain clouds, erosion channels carved into hillsides, rounded pebbles smoothed by flowing liquid, drainage networks that looked exactly like river deltas on Earth, shorelines with the same fractal complexity as the coast of Norway. Titan looked like home. It looked so much like Earth that for a brief, dizzying moment, scientists wondered if they were looking at the data correctly. The topography was familiar. The processes were familiar. The cycle of evaporation, condensation, and precipitation, the hydrological cycle that defines Earth's climate, was happening on Titan. But it was all wrong. The rain is not water. It is liquid methane, liquid ethane, liquid natural gas, the same substance you burn in your kitchen stove, falling from the sky in fat, slow drops. The drops fall slowly because Titan's gravity is only 14% of Earth's. A raindrop on Titan is about a centimeter across, twice the size of a raindrop on Earth, and it takes several minutes to reach the ground. It would be almost peaceful to watch, almost beautiful, almost familiar, almost. The temperature is minus 179 degrees Celsius. At that temperature, water is not a liquid. It is a rock. The bedrock of Titan is made of water ice, frozen so hard it behaves like granite. The mountains on Titan are made of ice. The pebbles Huygens photographed on the surface are ice. The boulders are ice. Water on Titan is the stone that the world is built from. And the liquid that flows across that stone, filling the lakes, carving the rivers, falling from the clouds, is methane. On Earth, methane is a gas. On Titan, it is the ocean. Titan has 3 large seas, Kraken Mare, Ligeia Mare, and Punga Mare, all located near the North Pole. Kraken Mare alone is larger than the Caspian Sea, with an estimated depth of over 300 meters. These are not puddles. These are vast bodies of liquid hydrocarbon, with waves, with tides influenced by Saturn's gravity, with coastlines that shift and change with the seasons. If you jumped into Kraken Mare, you would not float. Liquid methane is less dense than water, and your body, even in a spacesuit, would be denser than the liquid. You would sink. And as you sank, the cold would kill you almost instantly. Minus 179 degrees. Your suit would crack. The seals would fail. The liquid methane would flood in. Your blood would not freeze. It would vitrify, turn to glass. You would shatter. Your remains would sink to the bottom of an alien sea on a moon orbiting a gas giant 1 billion kilometers from home. No one would ever find you. And the land between the seas is no less alien. Titan's equatorial regions are covered in vast dune fields, hundreds of kilometers of parallel ridges, like the sand seas of the Sahara or the empty quarter of Arabia. But these dunes are not made of sand. They are made of organic molecules, complex hydrocarbons that have rained down from the atmosphere over millions of years. Essentially, they are dunes of plastic, dark, static-charged grains of hydrocarbon soot, hundreds of meters high, sculpted by winds that blow at only a few kilometers per hour, but never stop. If you walked through them, the grains would cling to you. Static electricity in Titan's dry atmosphere would make the particles stick to your suit, your visor, your gloves. You would be coated in alien plastic. Titan is a world that mimics Earth in every way and gets every detail fatally wrong. It has rain, but the rain is fuel. It has rivers, but the rivers would dissolve your suit. It has mountains, but the mountains are ice. It has dunes, but the dunes are plastic. It has a thick atmosphere, but the atmosphere is opaque and toxic. It has seasons, but each season lasts 7 Earth years. It is Earth reflected in a funhouse mirror, a toxic twin. A world that wears the mask of habitability over the face of something profoundly alien. And yet, and this is what keeps astrobiologists awake at night, Titan has chemistry, complex chemistry. The atmosphere is full of organic molecules, the building blocks of life as we know it. Hydrogen cyanide, acetylene, ethylene, benzene, the raw materials for amino acids. Some scientists have speculated that Titan could harbor life. Not life as we know it, not water-based carbon-oxygen life, but methane-based life. Organisms that breathe hydrogen, eat acetylene, and exhale methane. Organisms that would find Earth as hostile as we find Titan. Organisms that would look at our oceans of liquid water and recoil in horror, the way we recoil at their oceans of liquid methane. We have no evidence of this, but we cannot rule it out. And that uncertainty, that tiny, nagging possibility that something might be alive in those dark methane seas, something that thinks and moves and feeds in a chemistry we have never imagined, is one of the most profound questions in all of science. Now forget Titan for a moment, because the most important moon in Saturn's kingdom is not the biggest. It is one of the smallest. Enceladus. Enceladus is tiny, only 500 kilometers across, small enough to fit inside the borders of Arizona. You could drive across it in a few hours. It is a ball of ice, brilliant white, reflecting almost 100% of the sunlight that hits it. It is the most reflective body in the entire solar system. A perfect gleaming snowball orbiting a gas giant in the outer darkness of the solar system. For decades, nobody paid much attention to it. It was too small, too cold, too far from the sun. It was classified as just another frozen rock in Saturn's entourage. Boring, dead, irrelevant, a footnote in the catalogue of moons. We were catastrophically wrong. In 2005, the Cassini spacecraft made a close flyby of Enceladus and saw something that changed the course of planetary science forever. At the South Pole, there were cracks. 4 parallel fractures in the ice, each about 130 kilometers long, spaced roughly 35 kilometers apart, glowing with heat. Infrared sensors showed they were significantly warmer than the surrounding ice. Scientists called them tiger stripes, because that is what they looked like. Blue-green scars slashed across the white surface. Wounds in the ice. And from these wounds, Enceladus was bleeding. Giant plumes of water vapor and ice particles were erupting from the tiger stripes, shooting hundreds of kilometers into space at supersonic speed. Geysers. On a moon that was supposed to be dead. Enceladus was spraying its own interior into the vacuum of space with the force of a fire hose. The plumes were so massive that they fed Saturn's E-ring, the faint outermost ring, with fresh ice particles. Enceladus was not just a moon. It was a fountain, a geyser world, a tiny ball of ice screaming water into the void. Cassini flew through the plumes, directly through them, multiple times. And what it tasted changed. Everything. Water, sodium chloride, table salt, silica nanoparticles, which can only form in hot water, at least 90 degrees Celsius, interacting with rock. Molecular hydrogen, a chemical signature of hydrothermal activity, of water reacting with hot rock in the absence of sunlight. And organic molecules. Complex organic molecules. Large carbon-rich compounds with molecular weights above 200 atomic mass units. The building blocks of life. The implications hit the scientific community like a shockwave. Beneath the frozen shell of Enceladus, beneath perhaps 30 to 40 kilometers of solid ice, there is a global ocean. Not a small pocket of meltwater, not a subsurface lake. A global ocean of liquid water that wraps around the entire moon. An ocean that is in contact with a rocky seafloor. An ocean that is warm. An ocean that is chemically active. How? Enceladus is tiny. It should have frozen solid billions of years ago. It is too small to retain internal heat from its formation. It has no radioactive core large enough to keep itself warm. By every calculation, it should be dead. A frozen, inert ball of ice drifting through the darkness. But Saturn will not let it die. Enceladus orbits Saturn in a slightly elliptical orbit, maintained by a gravitational resonance with the larger moon, Dione. As Enceladus moves closer and farther from Saturn on each orbit, Saturn's immense gravity squeezes and stretches the little moon, like a hand kneading a ball of dough. This is called tidal heating. The constant flexing generates friction inside Enceladus, and that friction generates heat. Enough heat to maintain a liquid ocean. Enough heat to power hydrothermal vents on the ocean floor. Enough heat to keep a dead moon alive. Saturn is keeping Enceladus warm. The same gravity that murdered a moon to make the rings is nurturing another moon with a hidden ocean. Destroyer and creator. Killer and caretaker. That is Saturn. Hydrothermal vents. On Earth, hydrothermal vents at the bottom of our oceans are surrounded by thriving ecosystems. Tube worms 2 meters long, eyeless shrimp, chemosynthetic bacteria that convert hydrogen sulfide into energy. Life that exists in total darkness, under crushing pressure, at temperatures that would kill most surface organisms, sustained not by sunlight, but by chemical energy from the Earth's interior. Many scientists believe that life on Earth may have originated at hydrothermal vents, that the first living cells were born in hot, mineral-rich water at the bottom of a dark ocean 4 billion years ago. Enceladus has hot, mineral-rich water at the bottom of a dark ocean. It has liquid water, it has heat, it has salt, it has organic molecules, it has chemical energy, it has a rocky seafloor with hydrothermal activity. It has every single ingredient that we believe is necessary for life. Every single one. In the deep, dark pressure of Enceladus, shielded from radiation by kilometers of ice, warmed by the gravitational embrace of Saturn, fed by chemical reactions at the seafloor. Something might be alive. Not might have been alive. Not might be alive someday. Might be alive right now, today, as you listen to this. In the dark, in the deep, in the silence beneath the ice. We do not know. We have not looked closely enough. We have not sent the right instruments. Cassini was not designed to detect life. It was designed to study Saturn's atmosphere and rings. The discovery of Enceladus' ocean was an accident. A beautiful, terrifying accident. But the possibility is real. It is scientifically credible. It is taken seriously by NASA, by ESA, by every major space agency on Earth. And it is, without exaggeration, one of the most important questions humanity has ever asked. Are we alone? A tiny moon orbiting a gas giant 1.2 billion kilometers from the Sun might hold the answer. And we found it by accident, because we happened to send a spacecraft to study Saturn's rings, and it happened to fly past a moon we thought was boring. The universe hides its greatest secrets in the smallest places. Everything we know about Saturn, the rings, the hexagon, the storms, Titan, Enceladus, the ring rain, the spokes, the vortex, the tiger stripes, we owe to one machine. Cassini. Launched on October 15th, 1997, from Cape Canaveral, Florida, Cassini traveled for 7 years to reach Saturn. It used gravity assists from Venus, twice, from Earth, and from Jupiter, slingshotting across the solar system like a billiard ball on a cosmic table. It carried 12 scientific instruments and the Huygens probe. It weighed 5,600 kilograms. It was the size of a school bus, and it was alone. When it finally arrived on June 30th, 2004, it fired its main engine for 96 minutes and slipped into orbit around Saturn. It was the first spacecraft to ever orbit the ringed planet. And for the next 13 years, it became our eyes, our ears, our hands at Saturn. Cassini completed 294 orbits. It made 162 targeted flybys of Saturn's moons. It discovered 7 new moons. It deployed the Huygens probe to Titan's surface, the most distant landing ever achieved by a human-made object. It flew through the plumes of Enceladus and tasted an alien ocean. It photographed the hexagon in detail for the first time. It watched the great white spot erupt and rage across the planet. It measured the mass of the rings. It mapped the magnetic field. It listened to the radio emissions. It captured an image of Earth, a pale blue dot seen through Saturn's rings from 1.5 billion kilometers away. That reminded us once again of our own smallness. Cassini was, by any measure, one of the most successful space missions in human history. It transformed Saturn from a distant jewel into a known world. It turned moons we had ignored into places we desperately want to visit. It changed the way we think about where life might exist in our solar system. And then it had to die. By 2017, Cassini was running out of fuel. Its thrusters were nearly empty. The hydrazine that had kept it on course for 2 decades was almost gone. Soon, it would no longer be able to control its trajectory. It would become a drifting hulk, a dead spacecraft in orbit around Saturn, at the mercy of gravity. And that was the problem, because Enceladus was there, Titan was there, moons that might harbor life, moons that might have oceans. If Cassini, carrying Earth bacteria, Earth microbes, Earth contamination baked into its instruments and structure, crashed into one of those moons, it could compromise everything. It could seed an alien ocean with terrestrial microbes. It could contaminate a pristine alien environment. It could make it impossible to ever know whether life we found there was native or something we accidentally brought with us. NASA made the hardest choice in the mission's history. They ordered Cassini to destroy itself. The final phase was called the Grand Finale. Beginning in April 2017, Cassini was directed into a series of 22 daring orbits that threaded the gap between Saturn and its innermost ring. Space only 2,000 kilometers wide, that no spacecraft had ever entered. It was flying through uncharted territory at 120,000 kilometers per hour, with ring particles on one side and Saturn's atmosphere on the other. Any collision with a ring particle, even one the size of a grain of sand at that velocity, would have been instantly fatal. Cassini survived all 22 passes. It sent back unprecedented data about Saturn's interior structure, its gravitational field, its magnetic field, the mass and age of the rings, the composition of the upper atmosphere. Data that scientists will be analyzing for decades. Each pass was a gift. Each pass was a gamble. Each pass brought it closer to the end. And then on September 15th, 2017, Cassini made its final orbit. It turned its high-gain antenna toward Earth one last time. It began transmitting, and then it dove, nose first, deliberately, obediently, into the atmosphere of the monster it had studied for 13 years. The spacecraft hit the upper atmosphere at over 110,000 kilometers per hour. It fought. Its thrusters fired automatically, trying to keep the antenna pointed at Earth, trying to maintain the data link, trying to send back every last byte of information. For 91 seconds, Cassini battled Saturn's atmosphere, transmitting data about the composition and structure of the clouds it was falling through. 91 seconds of defiance. 91 seconds of a machine refusing to stop doing what it was built to do. And then Saturn won. The heat and pressure overwhelmed the spacecraft. The thrusters could no longer compensate. Cassini tumbled. The data link broke. The signal, traveling at the speed of light across 1.5 billion kilometers of empty space, went silent. 83 minutes later, the silence reached Earth. In the control room at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California, the screens went flat. The telemetry stopped. The Doppler signal flatlined. And the room full of scientists and engineers, people who had spent 20 years of their lives building, launching, and operating this machine. People who had celebrated its triumphs and worried through its close calls. People who had named it and talked to it and thought of it as something more than metal and wire, sat in silence. Some cried, some hugged, some just stared at the screens. Cassini was gone, vaporized, melted, torn apart molecule by molecule and absorbed into the atmosphere of the planet it had studied for 13 years. It became part of Saturn. Its atoms are there now, mixed into the golden clouds, falling with the ring rain, drifting in the jet streams. Forever. A machine built by humans, carrying the curiosity and ambition of an entire species, sacrificed itself to protect the possibility of alien life on a moon most people have never heard of. That is what we are capable of. That is what Saturn demanded of us. And we did it without hesitation. Saturn feels eternal. It has been there for 4.5 billion years. It was there before life existed on Earth. It was there before the oceans formed. It was there before the continents took shape. It will be there long after every human who has ever lived is forgotten. It is ancient beyond comprehension, but it is not eternal. Nothing is. The rings are dying. We already know this. Ring rain is pulling them into the planet at a rate that will erase them completely within 100 to 300 million years. The most beautiful feature of the most beautiful planet in our solar system is temporary, a flash of brilliance in a 10 billion year story, a wound that is slowly closing. And Saturn itself? In about 5 billion years, our sun will exhaust its hydrogen fuel and expand into a red giant. Its outer layers will swell past the orbit of Mercury, past Venus, past Earth. Earth will be consumed, burned, erased. Everything we have ever built, every book, every song, every memory, vaporized in the expanding atmosphere of a dying star. Saturn, farther out, will survive the expansion. But the sun's increased luminosity will transform it. The rings, if any remain, will sublimate. The icy moons will melt. Titan's methane will evaporate into space. Enceladus's ocean will boil through its shell and escape into the void. Whatever might be swimming in that dark water will die. The court of 140 moons will be stripped, scattered, destroyed. And then the sun will collapse into a white dwarf, a dense, cooling ember the size of Earth, and Saturn will orbit a dead star in a dark, cold solar system. No light, no warmth, no rings, no moons, no storms, no hexagon, no geysers, no oceans. Just a gas giant drifting in the void, slowly cooling, slowly fading, slowly losing its heat to the infinite cold of space, until it is indistinguishable from the darkness around it. Everything ends. Even monsters, even gods, even Saturn. But right now, Saturn is here. The rings are here. The hexagon is spinning. Enceladus is erupting. Titan's methane rain is falling in slow, fat drops through an orange sky. The great white spot is building toward its next eruption. The spokes are dancing across the B-ring. The ring rain is falling, and somewhere, in the dark ocean beneath the ice of a tiny moon, in water warmed by the gravity of a gas giant, near a hydrothermal vent on a rocky sea floor that has never seen sunlight, something might be swimming. We are alive at the exact right moment to see all of it. This moment. This brief, impossible window when Saturn has rings and Enceladus has an ocean, and we have the technology to know about it. A few 100 million years earlier, and there would be no rings to see. A few 100 million years later, and they will be gone. But we are here, now, in the only moment that matters. So look up tonight. Find that golden dot in the night sky. It will be there, steady and bright, the way it has been for every human who has ever lived. And remember what you now know. It is not peaceful. It is not gentle. It is a violent, screaming, spinning colossus that murders moons and wears their remains as jewelry. It is a world of impossible geometry and planet-wide seizures. It is a graveyard and a cradle, a destroyer and a creator, a machine and a mystery, a trap, the most beautiful trap in the solar system. And we walked right into it. Saturn is the most beautiful thing in our sky. But remember, beauty can be deadly.